Hello there, world. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending where you are around the seven continents and wherever you're watching this podcast. Today, we have a special guest. I consider a big time special guest and a personal friend of mine, Jorge Quintero, aka known online as Mindfully Conscious. How you doing, George?
Thank you so much for the introduction, Juan. I'm doing excellent this morning from Houston, Texas.
Man, it's so great technology sometimes how we can connect that we don't have to even be right in front of each other, man. It's a pleasure talking to you today. It's a pleasure having you on the platform. Like I mentioned, you're a good friend of mine. I remember when I met you online, I think I found you. That's how special you were. And you've really evolved since then. And you even have a book coming out, which we're about to get to. But before we even get into all that, just in case the audience forgot from our IG Live, do you mind saying a little bit about yourself and what got you into psychology and neuroscience?
Yes, and just to add a little bit of information and context, like you were mentioning, to repeat, my name is Jorge Quintero. I'm 25 years old. I got my degree in electrical engineering a few years ago, and I had a kind of like a quarter life crisis when I started my first engineering job. I was designing memory for a company that created consumer or chips for consumer electronics. So imagine all the black little squares that you see on the motherboard for your TV, for your computer, for your cell phone. I was making those, and based on my experiences from college, I thought that that would be the best path for me. And when I stepped into that environment where my coworkers were 10, 15, 20 years older than me, I could not connect with them on a personal level. I realized that I was not someone that could spend all day, every day in an office. And I realized that the work that I was doing was just not fulfilling and it was just not impactful for me. And so, what do I mean by that? It's just, in general, the job that I was in did not fulfill me. It did not satisfy me. And I had this internal tension that I couldn't ignore. Like every day that I stepped into the office, I wanted to leave. I was looking at the clock constantly. And it got to a point where I realized that this was just going to keep happening. Um, and I struggled quite a bit with it because I was told that work shouldn't be enjoyable, that work is work. And, you have to make some sacrifices to survive. And I was just not okay with that mentality. So what I ended up doing was I ended up exploring, and I was willing to try anything to just relieve myself of that internal conflict of just being in a really unfulfilling spot. So to, just to not drag this on for really long, I ended up trying several things. I ended up starting my own business in real estate. I tried real estate investing for about a year and a half. In this niche called wholesaling, which is essentially just marketing and negotiation for investment properties. You get paid on those skills, but as an engineer transitioning into marketing and sales, I realized that the technical skills that I had and the work ethic that I had didn't necessarily translate into success in marketing and sales. Real estate is a very personable, very social business. And as an engineer, I just did not have those skills. I was pretty much starting from scratch, like as an undergrad, just learning and trying to put the pieces together. And I just couldn't make it work between like working a full-time job as an engineer, because obviously I wasn't going to just leave my secure income, but I was really working hard to get myself out of that situation so I could be in a more fulfilling spot. And what ended up happening was I just couldn't take it anymore. Like there was just one day at the end of August of 2018 where I said, you know what, this, like, enough is enough. If I don't take a major risk and just dedicate all my time and my effort to finding fulfillment, then I don't know when it's going to happen, because this working part-time in this business is not working for me. Let me try working full-time. And regardless of that sacrifice or that risk that I took, I still had a safety net. I had about 6 months of income that I put aside for something like this. And I worked at it. I worked really hard with a partner for 6 months, just trying to get my business off the ground. But I think the belief wasn't really there because I was struggling for so long already. I would say the partnership was just not the best because it was my first business and I was just working with someone that I liked instead of someone that complemented my skills. And what ended up happening was I ended up being broke in January of 2019. I went out of business. I couldn't afford to continue to put money into marketing and to spend time just paying to live. So I took a step back and I kind of reflected on my experiences and I said, well, what are the things that I liked and I didn't like from my engineering experience and my real estate experience? I liked the people facing role that the real estate industry provided, but I hated working with very emotional homeowners that understandably were in that emotional state because it was a big transition. They were selling their property. Typically they were in very distressed situations, like their house had mold or it needed a lot of repairs, or they were going under foreclosure. They were behind on their taxes. These are all very stressful situations. And that was something that I kind of wanted to push away from. So I decided to combine the two, and I ended up applying to jobs in technical sales, which is just engineering, but on the sales side. And I applied to several jobs and I ended up landing the job that I have now, which is a technical sales role, where I actually support and provide technology to hospitals that is used in deep brain stimulation surgery. And we can talk a little bit more about what this surgery is about if you want to. But for me, that was an amazing, it was an amazing transition. It felt like it was meant to happen because the things started lining up. I got trained within a few weeks and I witnessed my first deep brain stimulation surgery live. And I was able to see how shocking brain tissue of patients that had Parkinson's disease, essential tremor, or other movement disorders would literally be treated, or their symptoms would go away simply by shocking brain tissue. And that was so fascinating to me because it was something unlike anything I had ever witnessed before. And I was so curious about just learning more about this that I ended up reading books about neuroscience, and I ended up learning more about the brain and why this procedure worked. And this laid the groundwork for my page, Mindfully Conscious, because not only did I learn more about deep brain stimulation, but I learned more about how the brain works when it's at its best and how it works when it's at its worst. And I started taking that information and applying it to not only my own life, but sharing it with others so that they can see just how transformative this knowledge can be if you just understand how your brain works. It's incredible because it's impacted my life in so many facets. I've become better at managing stress. I've become more focused. I've become more disciplined, more resilient. There's just so many ways that this information has impacted my life. And now I'm at a point where I want to continue to give that back to others so that their lives can improve. And that's essentially my story, from graduation from an engineer to what I do now.
You know, something I notice oftentimes from the greats, no matter George, whether we're talking about Olympic gold medalists, we're talking about other authors, or we're talking just about public figures that come out of nowhere, but they make an impact around the world and in their communities. I always notice that at some point they hit what they consider rock bottom. And just for the audience out there, the narratives we form, we say it all the time about our lives, is very crucial in what transpires afterwards. So it may not matter what I see as someone else as rock bottom, but if that person feels that's rock bottom, then that's what it is. And George, in your case, you felt you hit rock bottom and you propelled forward. And it's amazing because it just goes to show how when someone keeps searching, they keep trying to look for what they want, the type of results they want in their life, they get to manifest it themselves. And so when you were feeling rock bottom during the time where you had the 6 month savings, you went into real estate, right? With a partner, which you said didn't complement your skills, you just liked, which is kind of impressive considering I've been a lot into business a little bit more lately personally, and all of a sudden it didn't work out. How did that feeling feel like? You know, the business didn't go as well as you like, and now your pockets were empty, but you still needed to find a way forward. You still were searching. You weren't going to give up. What was that feeling like? Because a lot of times we hit that, some of us hit that feeling, and we want to lay down flat, but it didn't seem like you did that. So what was that feeling like? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and it's a very interesting feeling, Juan. I don't think many people experience this, or maybe more people do than I think, but hitting rock bottom is a very interesting situation because you become very unlike yourself. And what I mean by that is when you feel your best, you feel like you're whole. You feel like this is who I'm meant to be. When you're rock bottom, that all comes apart. So one thing that comes to mind is as I was working on my real estate business and I was seeing my savings dwindle. At first it was fine. Like for the first month or two, it's like, you know what, I still have time. But after the third month and the fourth month started, passing, and I wasn't making that much money, you start getting into this kind of this state that has an underlying amount of stress that's just an elevated amount. What I mean by this is that you could be living your normal everyday life, but in the background, there's just an underlying stress that's consistently present. And as this stress continues to rise, like as I was working and my savings continued to dwindle, it would just get higher and higher and higher. And you almost get into a form of desperation. You get into this form of like irrationality. You're unable to think logically. All you can focus on is making money. You pretty much sacrifice a lot of your values for this one goal that you're really pushing towards. And when I hit rock bottom, it was really devastating for me because I come from a family that has always struggled financially. And I promised myself as a teenager that I would never be in a situation where I was pretty much in the same spot. I was broke, trying to find out how I was going to make my next paycheck, that being in that situation. So knowing that that had happened to me was just a blow to my self-esteem. It was a blow to my confidence. And I could have just stayed there and I could have just returned to my engineering job and know that the fact that I was in my early 20s, I was still very employable. I always had that safety net, which I guess allowed me to make this risk. But really, what I did that I think allowed me to propel forward was that I dwelled in that situation and I took a step back. I literally took maybe pretty much the last couple $100s I had, and I took a like 3-week vacation to Mexico. And luckily I have family there that could house me, they could feed me, and they're very generous and kind. So I didn't have to spend a lot of money when I was there. I really just bought the plane ticket. But that gap that I gave myself to just distance myself away from everything that was causing me harm and giving me stress and making me feel like I just couldn't do things, it allowed me to really assess things and to come up with those conclusions about what I liked, what I disliked, how I should make my next move. And I think this is really important for anybody that hits rock bottom, is to just give yourself some time to reflect. Because if you don't reflect and you just react, you'll most likely end up in the same position sometime again in the future. And the whole point of hitting these crucial moments of your life is to make sure that they never happen again, or that they set you up for future success in another avenue,
George, this podcast, this platform itself, we take a lot of pride in psychological knowledge. We take a lot of pride in scientific facts such as neuroscience. We take a lot of pride in spirituality. And it's not something that a lot of clinicians like talking about, but here on this platform we do. And when oftentimes when people hit rock bottom, you mentioned how we become someone we're not. We tend to become irrational until what it sounds like to me, and I could be wrong because it's your story, but it sounds like to me the way you worded it, you finally surrendered. You surrendered to the circumstances. You ended up grabbing your $100. You want to see family. What better people you can see in a downtime? And all of a sudden, you regrouped your energy. You went, you rallied, and you moved forward. And tell me what happened after that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so once I regrouped and I felt collected and calm and I knew that things were going to be okay. I mean, I obviously did have the stress of being able to pay my bills because I had a car and I had insurance and a cell phone, and that all costs money. I had a time frame in which I had to decide what my next job opportunity would be. Um, and I was very selective. I made sure that I not only were the people that were interviewing me were asking me questions, but I was also making sure that I asked questions so that I had a very clear idea of exactly what it was that I would be working on, who I would be working with, and that I think allowed me to really make the best decision possible. Now, I do want to say that the job that I have now, it was kind of like a leap of faith because at the pretty much at the end, when I was just about to decide between which job I wanted to take, I was stuck between two job opportunities. There was one in Houston that was a sales position for an oil and gas consulting firm. And I had visited their office. I had done several interviews already. I loved their team. I loved the work ethic. I loved how everybody had a lot of responsibility. And I was so certain that I wanted to work for them. Like I was praying pretty much every day after my final interview that I could just get that opportunity. Like I feel like I would be so happy there. Whereas the job that I have now, it was kind of like, well, I don't know how I'll do working from home and traveling often and this and that. It was just a lot of uncertainty. So in my mind, it wasn't the sure thing. Like I had spent a lot more time at this Houston office. I just felt like I would like them better. And funny enough, the CEO of the company of the job that I really wanted, he called me up after the final interview about a week later, and he tells me, "Hey, Jorge, you're the perfect person for this job, and we think that you have the perfect mindset, and like everything is great, but we just need someone with more experience right now." And that was a blow to me. I was really disappointed. And so I had this only one offer on the table. And I pretty much had to tell myself, do I take this risk? I don't know if I'm going to really enjoy this. And I looked at my savings and I said, well, I could last another month if I wanted to search for another job, but who knows if I'm going to find something that I'll really like resonate with. And I just put it in God's hands. I said, you know what? I'm just going to trust you, God. If, worst thing comes to worst, I can just find another one later. But I'm going to take the risk and I'm going to try this out. And I tried it out and it ended up being so much better than I could have expected. Literally, this conversation between yourself and myself would never have happened if I didn't take this job. The book that I'm releasing in a few days would have never existed had I not taken this chance. My whole Instagram platform would not exist if I hadn't taken this chance. So it's just incredible to think how sometimes you don't have all the information, but that's okay. You can still make a decision to take a risk if you've assessed all the variables properly. And who knows, you never know if something is going to be for you or not until you actually try it out.
The butterfly effect, man, and and how one small thing that happens can change the whole course of events of a person's life. Like us sitting here in front of us, each other. Looking back, you mentioned the word disappointed when they called you. Everything's great. You're the perfect candidate, but we need someone with more
But
experience. Now, looking back at that, how do you feel about their decision now? not saying animosity towards them or anything, but just in your life,
Yeah.
like how do you feel about the decision now? Now that you look back, at the time you're disappointed, but how do you feel about that now?
Yeah, I feel like it was a blessing in disguise. And I'm spiritual in that regard. Like I think that that everything kind of happens for a reason, and opportunities will present themselves to you, and you'll just become receptive to the ones based on your own mindset at the time. And so I feel very glad that that happened in retrospect. Um, it's also really funny because I got an email from them the other day reaching out to me, wanting me to reapply and to get a job for them, and I just kind of brushed it away because I'm in a spot now that I'm very fulfilled in what I'm doing, and I personally believe that I'm on a trajectory that serves myself and serves others. And it's something that I had never experienced before. I had never been in this position where I have myself taken care of, I have all my needs met, and I have my whole cup full that I can still give to others on a consistent basis. I have never experienced that before. And this is what, to me, is the definition of happiness. It's not the money, it's not getting more possessions, it's not becoming like really rich. I want more of this, more of what's going on right now. I want more of it. You know, it's really amazing to just know that it's a process, right? Like you have to get your needs met, and then once your basic needs are met, like your physiological needs, your relationship needs, your social needs, and you have a good sense of self-esteem and self-efficacy, you just start transcending. And this kind of reminds me of a book I recently read by Dr. Kaufman. It's called Transcendence. Have you heard about it?
I heard about it, and I remember you talking a little bit about it, and some of the stuff you
Yeah.
were mentioning in Kaufman's book include Abraham Maslow's pyramid, and I'm not sure if that's what you're referencing to there, but it
Yeah,
quite sounded like it.
I was, but it essentially in the book it talks about how meeting your basic needs is kind of like creating this foundation or this structure. Dr. Kaufman actually reinvents the pyramid into a sailboat, and he says that you have to build the boat first before you can attach the sail to kind of allow the winds to guide it in different directions. And so if you don't have the boat, you can't even swim in this ocean of possibilities that exists in your life. Um, and I think that now reflecting on my own personal experiences, where I joined this company Alpha Omega that provides a technology for deep brain stimulation surgery, that provided the foundation, and it allowed my mindset to be clear enough that I can just be completely blown away and awestruck by the procedure, the neuroscience, and combining those now into something that I call purpose.
You mentioned how earlier on in the interview about your system, and you were just talking now about the boat meeting the basic needs and relationships, social life, food, a nice place to sleep, or decent, just a place to sleep in general. And what if, when we look at research, the social support system someone has is a huge variable, George, in what we can predict as far as to what can manifest. It's not a causational effect. It's not an absolute, but it's definitely it definitely holds some weight. There's an association correlational factor. What contribution has your social support system, had on where you've come now spiritually, coming from, you lost basically your savings, you were denied unemployment, and you tried to do your own business before that, to now where you're in a comfortable position, you're still making strides, you're transcending yourself. And so what effect has your social support system had on you?
It's had an incredible effect, and that's an understatement. I would say that nothing that I've produced to this point, including my book, would have been possible without a social support structure. I know that this is supposed to be an interview between yourself and myself, the author of my book, Mind Shift. But I don't see it as a lone effort, because if you could see how many times I was frustrated when I was writing the book, how many times I wanted to give up, or how many times I got frustrated and I couldn't explain a concept as clearly as I wanted to. If I was completely alone, I would have never finished that project. I would have given up. Absolutely. And it was a combination of many people that have helped me create the product that I've created. I had a person named Neftali Neri, who just got her degree in neuroscience, that looked over the content in my book, and she ensured that everything was accurate and up to date information. I had another friend that my girlfriend knew. Her name is Natalie Swanson, who got her degree in English, and she helped me with the argument and the structure of my book. My girlfriend in particular was probably the biggest supporter of all, because she pretty much had to witness myself in all of these moments of frustration, of exhaustion, of not wanting to continue. And oftentimes she was the only one that could just pretty much snap me back into reality and say, you know what, you're just having a tough time. Let's think about this. Let's consider these ideas. She was the one that pushed me to take the next step forward when I didn't even want to take the step. Now, I do also want to mention that the social support structure can work in the opposite way. It can actually detract from what you're trying to do. And another example, going back to my real estate days, living with my parents at the time was very difficult, because in their minds, according to their values and the way that they grew up, what they wanted of myself and my siblings was to have a white collar job, have stability, work a 9 to 5, retire, and that's it. And when I made the transition from engineering to becoming a full-time real estate entrepreneur, they were telling me every single day, oh, I can't believe that my son, who's an engineer and was making all this good money, decided to just give all that up and now be paying to survive. Or I can't believe that you're doing this. Where, like, I don't see you making any money. You just need to quit. Like, just constantly in my ear, just yapping about how this wasn't it. Like, this wasn't it. And I had to really just create a shell around that, because otherwise, I mean, don't get me wrong, I think it did have a psychological effect on me, but I had to intentionally just put a guard up, because if I didn't, it was just going to quickly just deteriorate the belief in myself. It was quickly going to make me doubt things, and it just didn't make my journey any easier. So it can go both ways. And the interesting thing about the brain is that it's a relational structure. It doesn't just exist in isolation. Yes, it sits in isolation in your skull, but it can only make sense of things in, based on relationships and based on associations. And the fact that we are a social species, like the human race is a social species, that just emphasizes this characteristic even more.
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely, man. And as a social species, we're always have variables at play that we don't see because of our relationships, like you mentioned. But George, when in regards to this social circle, you say how they propelled you, they helped you, and then you gave an example how in the past, how a social circle, and you used your life as an example, which I appreciate. Um, how they can sometimes deter you back, and without them realizing, they think they're helping you, but really what they're doing is they're creating walls within you, or they're creating um, insecurities within you, right? And it sounds like you've made harmony with the fact that it's not that they did it intentionally, it's that they're just trying to help based on what they know. And
Exactly.
I notice oftentimes we're living in a society where now with social media, it's even caught psychologists by surprise. The trends, right? Social media provides, something happens the next day, people react. They don't even look at the facts. They don't look at anything. They just react. It's almost like a reaction culture what's being created through social media sometimes, you know. And if you're a big time social media person out there in the audience, I'm not knocking you. I'm just trying to point out some observations out there. But you've came to harmony with that, and you understood the bigger picture, and you understood it's, you know, you didn't try making your parents an enemy. It sounds like you didn't try making them the villain. You didn't try doing things to try and prove them wrong. You just kept searching for something more. Can you give a little secret as to how you were able to make that happen? Because I think a lot of people out there need to hear that, instead of trying to hold that revengefulness, or that person didn't believe in me and it's my mom and I'm going after them, so now I don't have a good relationships and I'm like this because of like that. But you found a positive. So do you mind sharing a little light on that? Because I think that would be nice for the audience out there.
Yeah, one of the most profound spiritual insights that I've taken with me in my own life is this idea, and I'm borrowing this from the Dalai Lama, but he mentions how human beings just want happiness and they want to avoid suffering. And this is a very vague phrase, but let me break it down a little bit, especially in the context of what we were just talking about. My parents, their definition of happiness included their kids. It included the vision that they had for myself and my siblings. And that vision was having that 9-to-5 secure, well-paid job. When I was threatening that image or that idea of happiness that was important to them, they obviously reacted, and they obviously were trying to dissuade me from it because of what they believed would bring me peace and would bring them happiness. And so, like, exactly like you said, I don't hold it against them, because you have to realize that no one wakes up on a given day and says, I'm going to make my son's life hard, I'm going to make my daughter's life miserable. No one wakes up like that. It's just the circumstances that arise that causes people to react. And for people that don't know this concept, a lot of times reactions are just reflexive and they're emotional by nature. They tend to be polarizing and create conflict. And once you can see this, you realize that people, at the end of the day, they want to be well-intentioned. They want to live in harmony with others. They want the best for themselves and the best for others according to their definition of what's best, right? And you have to understand that that no one is purposely out to get you either. You know, people have their own objectives. People have their own ideas, their own desires, their own hurts, their own pains. Pretty much a whole like inner life, the same that you have. They're their own protagonist in the story that plays in their head. And you have to just understand that. Like, you have to understand that there's just a lot of variables that you can't see, a lot of memories that you can't take into account, a lot of variables that are just invisible to you. But you don't have to think about all the variables. You just have to understand that at the end of the day, people want to pursue things that are going to make them happier and avoid things that cause suffering.
And you couldn't have worded that better, my friend. And I guess with that being said, I wanted to rebound off that, you know, and keep knocking it off, keep shooting them up. But I want to take the focus a little bit to your book, if you don't mind. And I guess this would be a good transition, because if we understand what you just mentioned, the tip that you just gave, and you used the Dalai Lama's quote as an example, where people just want to be happy. They don't really try to hurt anybody. It's just sometimes there's variables at play, and they come from a certain place that we don't understand, almost is how you said it, just a lot more articulate than I just did. But if we understand this, then we're to stop this reactionary state, we have to come from a clean place, a place of almost a space, which is what I try to reach when I'm in a meditative state, a clean slate, one that doesn't involve emotion, one that we're in a balance, in a homeostasis balance within ourselves. Touch upon how your book, George, which I know you put a lot of effort in. I remember meeting you in Wynwood and everything. You put a lot of time in. You gave it your best, and I'm expecting some great things from this book. How does your book help people reach this meditative state? And what does your book do for the audience out there? And I think this would be a good opportunity, George, to put it out there for your book, man, because I'm really, I'm letting you know right now, I'm really looking forward to it. And that's that I'm a mental health counselor and everything, man. But I'm always willing to learn something new, and I know that's going to come from this book.
Thanks for that, Juan. Honestly, it means a lot. And I think your transition is actually very perfect, because the whole purpose of my book is to define a new kind of mental awareness or self-awareness. Typically, we think of self-awareness as just understanding things that are happening inside of us, like understanding that your heart rate is racing, or your palms are getting sweaty, or the thoughts that are going on in your head. But we, up until recently, we didn't really understand how these processes arose. We didn't understand how the nervous system, which is the brain, the spinal cord, and the connections between the brain and the body, how these create those thoughts or those sensations or those emotions. If we understand how the brain does all of these things in the background beneath your conscious awareness, that to me is an even greater amount of this mental awareness or self-awareness that I was mentioning earlier. If we understand how our nervous system works, how our brain works, how the brain and the body are connected, we become essentially masters of our own biology, because then we understand pretty much the instruction manual. Okay, this is how this works. This is how that works. Okay, my emotions are signals and messengers. They're not necessarily things that I have to take to heart. Okay, my thoughts are not necessarily always just mine. Sometimes they just come up through the unconscious. Okay, my sensations are dependent on my expectations and what I want to be true. Once you understand all of these different factors, you stop becoming a victim to your own experience. You stop becoming someone that just reacts, or someone that is not consciously aware of the biases and the habits that are dictating your daily life. So in my book, Mind Shift, I talk about different aspects of well-being and performance that have personally impacted my own life. And I distill a lot of complex research, a lot of complex topics into a format that anybody can understand. You don't need a degree in neuroscience. You don't even need a degree in science. Like, if you have a high school degree, you can understand this book, and you can learn a lot of things from it about how you function on a biological level, on a psychological level, and use that to exploit your own biology, to do more, to feel better, to have better social connections, to find purpose and happiness. Like, one of the chapters in my book is literally about how to find long-lasting happiness, because I think it's a real problem, especially in capitalist societies like America and Europe. This idea that we can get happiness from achieving or pursuing external rewards is very antiquated, and it doesn't provide lasting happiness. And the reason why is because novelty fades away. Once we own something, we just expect it to always be there. Like, there's things in our biology that are intentionally screwing with our long-lasting happiness. And if we understand that happiness is a reproducible emotion, for example, we can start targeting activities or start targeting things in our life that bring us joy, and just do more of those. Because if happiness in the brain is a neurochemical composition, a neurochemical signature, then we just need to pursue the things that reproduce that neurochemical signature. And if we do that on a daily basis, we will have lasting happiness. So that's a brief example of exactly what's to come in my book. And I think everybody needs to read this, because it's not about me. It's not about some people that I interviewed. It's about the scientific facts and how those are applicable to your life. So it's a book about you, the reader.
George, I smile because I salivate at the thought of the book, and I already ordered it. So, when you start shipping it tomorrow, whatever it is, man, I pre-ordered it. So you better get here soon, because I salivate at the thought of reading it. But you know what? I love what you said, George. We're living in a time now where, we go 30 years back, 40 years back, even 20 years back, we can see the importance of getting a degree, right? Kind of, let's use me as an example, where I went to got my master's, I became a mental health counselor, I went through the licensing process, and yes, I am within the system, right? But the whole purpose of Psych Life, the whole purpose of you writing the book and your platform is to show how these things you don't have to really go to school for to learn. And why is it that in school we teach history, we teach history within a certain lens, and we teach math and we teach these complex equations and all these things, but we don't teach the things that are important, which is the mastery of our own body, of our own chemistry within our body per se. And I find that so important, and I think that your book is going to be able to give some light on that. One, by the way that our conversations we've had in the past, but also just by some of the things you mentioned in regards to that. And so, George, if you don't mind giving us some insight into the book, I know I already pre-ordered it, man. So be kind, okay? But just if you can give a little bit of insight as to, do you talk in there about actual practical application of some of the knowledge that you just provided there as to what's going to be inside?
Absolutely, Juan. I know that at the end of the day, I'm not trying to talk at you. I'm trying to get you to see things first and then give you tools that you can use with little to no effort at all. Because I know that everybody is busy. Everybody has a ton of things that they have to do. No one wants to spend 30 minutes a day on their well-being. As sad as that sounds, a lot of people are just busy. They would rather work harder at their job or spend more time with their friends or go out and eat or drink or whatever. And so I wanted to create tools that were practical enough, simple enough, and easy enough that you can implement in 5 to 10 minutes a day, and they will have huge impacts. And I mentioned this actually in my afterword, that the things that have personally brought me the biggest return have always been small mindset shifts, small shifts in the way that you see things, you perceive things, or the way that you understand things that have really added to my overall well-being. Like that quote that I mentioned earlier about from the Dalai Lama, how people just want to gravitate towards happiness and avoid suffering. That perspective shift was monumental for myself. So I put in a lot of quotes, a lot of simple interpretations and breakdowns of the neuroscience so that you can really take these perspectives with you, apply them to yourself, and also you have tools that you can use to manage stress, tools to learn better, tools to make better decisions and overcome bad habits, tools to generate more positive experiences and less negative ones through managing your expectations, tools to believe in yourself and to stop the negative self-talk, tools to do small things every day that can boost your mood or elevate your energy. These are all things that are important and that I think build to that holistic and full life that I was mentioning when I talked about how the combination of everything now has pretty much given me a fulfilling life. It's not just my work. It's not just the book. It's all the small things also that I do on a daily basis. It's the exercise. It's the meditation. It's spending time with people that I really love. It's getting sunlight early in the morning. It's going outside for 30 minutes a day, even if it's just for a walk or whatever. Like those are the things that contribute to that overall well-being.
Sounds to me one word: lifestyle. And the lifestyle you live, and the little things that you do within that lifestyle that really makes the bigger picture. And I appreciate that so much, George. So we got the knowledge and a basic terms so people can understand. You don't need to be a full-blown scientist or anything to understand this book. We got practical application in there, right? We have a little bit of the story that you gave in the beginning of the podcast, I'm assuming. Um, and and I don't know what more anyone can honestly ask for if they want something better for themselves. And for the audience out there, George is a good friend of ours, just in case you missed it in the beginning. And we're really excited to read this book ourselves. And that's because we can always gain something new, and titles don't matter, like George said, because at the end of the day, no school system teaches how to manage this, the chemistry in our body, the chemistry within our brain, how our body operates, the lifestyle we live. And these are important things for people to understand, George. And I don't know how to thank you, because even though I haven't had the book in my hands yet, it sounds like it's going to be a great book, man. I, I don't even know what else to say regarding that. But I do want to touch on one thing that you said, and this is going on now a little bit away from your book, but tied to your book. You mentioned capitalist culture. I'm not gonna, there's a cancel culture out there right now. I said capitalist, sorry, excuse my accent, but there's a cancel culture out there right now. And you mentioned capitalist for one reason though, and that's because European, westernized nations, let's use the word westernized, they tend to try and find happiness in the outside world. And you mentioned
Yeah.
how when I achieve this, this is how I'm going to be happy. When I get this brand new Tesla, that's when I'm going to be happy. Or when I finally get 100,000, or that apartment by the beach, or that, and or they'll wait 5 months to take a vacation. I've been there before months ago, man. And sometimes I still, on a bad day, I still get caught up. Oh, when am I taking that vacation? So all looking outside. When we went to Thailand, we interviewed shamans, we interviewed public figures, and what we noticed immediately in the culture around us, everybody was at peace despite them barely having anything. The dollar in their pocket barely weighed anything, but they were happy, they were at peace. So can I expect from your book a little insight, right, as to how to find that peace without having so much? And I'm sorry, this is a different question, almost touching on the same
Yeah.
thing, but I'll get so excited thinking about your book, man.
That means a lot, Juan. And
Uh,
yeah, I do touch on this because I think the idea of what external rewards can get you is very appealing, but we often don't understand what those rewards come with. So when we pursue more possessions, we don't realize that these possessions typically clutter our lives more, and they also come with additional maintenance that has to be done now, at least if you're going to maintain it and keep it for a long time. When we want higher accolades and higher positions because we want the status and the titles, we don't realize that that comes a lot of times with a lot more responsibility and a lot more pressure. When we want fame and fortune, we don't realize that oftentimes we have to we get that at the cost of our own privacy, which for a lot of people is very sacred. So it's a double-edged sword. Yes, we're going to get some sense of satisfaction from achieving these things, but we often are very short-sighted in the sense that we don't understand the other implications of obtaining these things. And like I was mentioning earlier, if we understand that happiness or pleasure or satisfaction is an internal chemical signature, it's a production of hormones and neurochemicals that create this sensation of positivity and happiness, then we just need to look inside. We need to reflect, okay, what are the things that really provide me a lot of happiness with little effort? I think people in less developed countries, because I would even put Latin America in this category also. We're westernized, but every time I've gone to Mexico, I've met some of the happiest people of my life, and they don't have much. And I think the reason why they're able to find these things is because they kind of have to reconcile the fact that they're not going to be rich, that they're not going to be famous, and that they're going to have to live a humble and not, there's nothing wrong with all of these things, but they understand that there's really no point in putting effort in pursuing these things. So they look inward and they find other ways to manifest that happiness. And so I believe that really at the cornerstone of finding long-lasting purpose and long-lasting well-being is reflecting on what is it that brings me happiness with what I've got, and keep those things close, because those are real indicators of things that are going to make you extremely happy with the least amount of effort. And this is a term that I haven't really used yet, but they're intrinsically motivating activities. They're activities that make you want to come back for more. just by doing them. So one of those is exercise. At first, exercise is uncomfortable, but once you've made it a lifestyle, you want to come back for more exercise because it makes you feel great. Whenever you have a great time with someone, that releases a lot of well-being chemicals that make you want to come back for more. And it's this difference between pursuing things that will provide an immediate reward, the intrinsically motivating activities, versus the extrinsically motivating activities, which require a lot of effort and there's a delayed gratification. For example, working a regular wage job, you have to work 2 weeks before you get a paycheck. But when I meditate once, I feel better immediately. I don't have to wait for that reward. It just happens because I do the activity. Whenever I spend time with close friends, I feel amazing during and after. I don't have to wait for the reward. And so I think it's this waiting, this like anticipation that really sets us up for disappointment and also not long-lasting well-being.
George, I love that. I love that, and your book does it touch on finding happiness within, and almost teaching people that not to go after the external reward for happiness. And I appreciate that
Exactly.
so much, man, because I think the world needs that. The world needs to listen to that, and it needs to know that happiness is found at that moment where you are. Um, and you have a chance to learn on how to control the chemistry in your body to achieve this certain biological state, joy, happiness, satisfaction. We could change all the terms for it, but at the end of the day, we all know what we're trying to search for. And it's not found by trying to get something, but by trying to master the chemistry within our body.
Exactly.
George, it's honestly been an honor having you on this podcast. We're approaching, I think, 1 hour, so we got probably about 7 to 8 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. I just wanted to ask you, is there any closing words you'd like to say to the audience? Because you are a very insightful person. You are a person that it goes to show that, and an example to everybody in the 21st century, 2020, that you don't need a degree. You don't need to go to school to learn, whether it be engineering, whether it be this. When it comes to your life, you don't need to go to school to learn. You can learn by picking up a book, by doing the things that you want to do the way you want to do them, by just wanting to learn. And people that are going to grab this book are grabbing it because they're trying to find something within themselves. And thank you so much for writing this book. Thank you so much for being who you are. Do you have any closing words for the audience?
I absolutely do, Juan. And I just want to end this podcast by saying that you're absolutely right. Right now in 2020, you do not need a degree to make an impact. And I'm an example of this. You can look at any person on, or many accounts on Instagram that have taken their own approach to many of the most common problems. How do you invest money? How do you learn how to start a coaching program? How do you learn about the mind? How do you do this? How do you do that? There's people that are providing information in all avenues. And the one thing that's super fascinating to me is that because of social media and because of our ability now to reach all kinds of individuals, you can almost sculpt your own pathway from scratch. It doesn't have to exist yet for you to actually do it. And even if it doesn't exist, you can become a master enough in some area that people will be willing to approach you and ask you questions about it. I've gotten questions about neuroscience. I know a friend that he's pretty much created his own kind of program where he works with Nike, he works with supplement companies, and he's like applying a mindset perspective to supplementation and to business. It's amazing to see just the potential that's out there. And the last thing, I know I said this is going to be the last thing, but the last thing that I want to say is that everyone, regardless of your past and your current circumstances, has a growth mindset. It doesn't matter whether you believe that you're naturally good at some things and naturally bad at other things, or if you believe that you are someone that can develop their skills. You are right in both circumstances, and that's because of a concept called neuroplasticity. Now, the fact that you believe in one thing or the other is just a matter of personal interpretation, but you have unlimited potential inside of you. You are able to actively and intentionally direct your attention and your energy to sculpt yourself in the way that you want. And that is an absolute fact. There's so much research out there now that supports this concept. Everybody can do whatever they want in this life. And it's just a matter of putting in the work and putting the attention on the right places. So I encourage everybody and I challenge everybody to, if you haven't taken anything away from this podcast, just take this one last, I guess, exercise with you and apply it to your life. Identify 3 things that you wish you could become better at. If they are a skill, a virtue, some personality trait, or something about you that you want to change. Maybe it's your mindset or your belief in yourself. Everything that's mindset related can absolutely be changed. And not only just mindset, behavior can be changed, personality can be changed, skills can be changed. I want you to list 3 things that are internal to you that you wish you could become better at. And reach out to someone that you know that already has those skills or those attributes or those mindset perspectives, and ask them how they got to those, how they achieved those states, how do they achieve those skills, how are they able to practice and master those behaviors. Because what you'll see is that it's really just a matter of repetition and practice. And that's the key to lasting change. It's not a get rich quick solution, or it's not a easy and done 5 minutes and see immediate results solution, but it's something that will take some effort, but will absolutely transform you. And that's a fact. You can get transformed from the day that you are born to the day that you die.
Thanks so much for that, George. And I hope the audience takes that with them and takes those and writes down those 3 things they want to improve in their own life and elevate themselves in. And I heavily recommend you grabbing Jorge Quintero's book, Mindset, and I'm going to post it on the caption of this video, whether it be on Spotify or YouTube. And George, I appreciate you so much being on the platform. Thank you so much for taking time to join us on this platform, on the Psych Life platform. Thank you for taking time and writing the book to try and help others elevate themselves and understand not only their inner workings, but the neuroscience, and just how to try and manage the chemistry within their body, and trying to help them understand the importance of lifestyle and the patterns that they develop for themselves in trying to reach this chemistry. So we really much appreciate that. And I appreciate you as a friend, man. And so I'm looking forward to the next time you come to Miami. So this time the burgers are on you, okay?
That sounds great, Juan. And I really, honestly, am very grateful for the opportunity to speak on your platform. I know you said that we're very good friends, but still, this is a very huge honor to just be able to provide knowledge and information that has changed my life and put it in a place that has the potential or the possibility to impact other people's lives, man. So there's a lot of love that I have for you and for Psych Life. And it's something that was on my bucket list, and now I get to check it off. So thank you so much, Juan.
No problem, man. Take care, Psych Lifers. Take care, George, and we'll keep in contact soon, okay?
For sure. Thank you.
No problem.